I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Hello, Ms. Riffat.
Yes, now I can hear.
I can hear you.
I know, but I can't hear Kashun. I can't hear. I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. So, Assalamu alaikum. Shinkai or Fawzia? Who's?
No, this is Shinkai, Riffat.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you?
Farsi balad dastein ya Farsi ya Pashto?
مردوش بلد هستم.
سلام من فارسی بلد هستم.
خیلی خوب. واو.
خیلی خوش آمدین.
سلامت باشین. چطور فارسی یاد گرفتین؟
ما قزلباش هستم. از جد ما از افغانستان و از ایران آمده بودن.
شما سال فارسی رو به یاد دارین. واو.
بله ما با پیشاور هستیم. خب همه فارسی صحبت میکنن، همه خانواده ما. ولی حالا دری شده است. میدونی حالا فارسی اون فارسی نیست، حالا دری شده است، میکس شده است. با اردو و پشتو و پنجابی همه چیز میکس شده است. کاشون I can't hear you.
خیلی خوب که شما سال به یاد دارین.
من I can't hear کاشون. I don't know.
میشه که میوت باشه.
شاید میدونم.
شما فسیلیتیت میکنید مجلس
این تکنولوژی درد سر است.
بله. هم فایده کردیم هم نقص کردیم.
نقصانم شده است فایده.
پازیتیو بود خوب نگاتیو بود دیگه. در بدریم. خانم یکی از ستاره که پشاور میخوان مجبین قزلباش.
آهنگ میره. اون ازدواج کرده بود همراه یک خیش ما، نمیدونم کی بوده، ولی خودش خو آغان بوده، خودش خو پشتون بود، آغان بود از پاک، ولی چیز قزلباش خودش نبود، ازدواج کرده بود همراه قزلباش. بله
قزلباش عروسی کرده بود.
بله عروسی کرده بود همراه قزلباش. Sorry, Kashun, I better speak to her on the WhatsApp and tell her I can't hear her. نمیدونم چی میشه الان.
وقتی پوره است باید شروع میشد.
باید بود. ما خو از 6:30 منتظر هستم. ما خو آمدم با 6:30 و گفتم که چیز از 6:30 من منتظر هستم. نمیدونم چی شد. हाँ काशुन क्या हुआ? मुझे तो आवाज नहीं आ रही आपकी.
हेलो.
अच्छा ठीक है. ओके. ऑलराइट. ओके.
हेलो.
जी राशिद साहब. जी
अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम. जी अब आप.
जी am I visible? Okay.
You're
welcome.
visible and audible both, so it's okay. That's good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Okay. And I think we can begin in a little while they're ready. Sure.
नहीं, लेकिन काशुन की आवाज तो नहीं आ रही मुझे, अभी भी नहीं आ रही. वो
काशुन, am I audible to you?
No, I can see her but I can't hear her.
I think they'll sort it out in a minute. Let me get in touch with them.
Okay, all right. लेकिन आप तो उसके आगे हैं उनके शिंकाई के उसके पे आगे हैं. Where is she gone? वो चली गई है जो अफगानिस्तान से हैं.
जी अफगान में मैं I'll just get in touch with her.
चलिए ठीक है, मैं बैठी हुई हूँ, इंतजार कर रही हूँ जैसे भी है.
Can you all hear me now?
Now I can hear you, yes, but I can't see you. I can hear you. That's good. Achha, now I can. Well.
Perfect. Apologies for the hiccup. I think I'm quite audible to everyone right now.
That's right.
Right.
I can hear you.
Perhaps we could start with the webinar.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kashum. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to a very interesting webinar titled Biden Presidency, Afghan Peace Process Through a Gendered Lens. The webinar is part of IPRI 2+2 series, which aims to bring speakers from both sides of the table as to have a more nuanced and rigorous discussion. Women in conflict resolution is a pertinent area to explore, especially with context to Afghan conflict. As long as the conflict goes, it's not every now and then that we hear a gendered perspective on the peace process. And who else to hear this from than the very women policy practitioners themselves? I'm truly honored to introduce our speakers for the webinar. Our first speaker is Ms. Fawzia Koofi. Fawzia Koofi is a member of the Afghan government delegation in Doha, negotiating with Taliban in intra-Afghan dialogue. She is an accomplished author, internationally known advocate for the rights of women and children. Ms. Fawzia Koofi was the first female in the Afghan parliament to be elected as second deputy speaker. Our second speaker for the webinar is Ms. Shinkai Karokhail, a parliamentarian in the National Assembly of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Shinkai works towards conflict prevention and promotes women's rights. She founded the gender budget in the national budget of Afghanistan. Our third speaker is Raphel. She is a senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, DC, Washington. With a 40 years experience in foreign affairs agencies and the government, Ms. Robin has expertise in political, security, and economic development issues. The fourth speaker for the webinar is our very own former ambassador, Riffat Masood. As veteran diplomat, Ambassador Raphel has served Pakistan at important appointments at the Foreign Office and Pakistan's mission overseas. Her notable positions include stints as ambassador in Tehran, Oslo, and the Deputy High Commissioner in New Delhi. Before we formally proceed with the webinar, I would request all our participants and the viewers to keep sending in your questions even during the course of the webinar. Kindly keep your questions short and precise, and please mention your name and designation followed by your question. So without any further delay, let's start with the webinar with the welcome remarks by Acting President IPRI, Brigadier Rashid Wali Janjua. Sir, if you may please.
Thanks, Kashan. Thank you so much. On behalf of Islamabad Policy Research Institute, I extend a very warm welcome to all the distinguished panelists on a subject which is of great importance and contemporary relevance. how could the dynamics of gender inclusivity in Afghan peace process play out under Biden presidency? So that's the essence of the topic today. The current Afghanistan peace process is taking place under altered environments in Afghanistan. The country has changed in many ways since 2001, when the Taliban, with their antiquated socio-political mores and limited religious understanding, imposed a strict moral code on Afghan society. The nation of women empowerment and their civil rights was a cultural heresy for the Afghan Taliban then. Things have changed a lot since those times. Some 2 decades on, the things are entirely different. A few developments have taken place that have evoked a new hope for gender equality and women empowerment. These developments include a war fatigue and a national propensity for rebuilding human ties. In addition, a realization for a national consensus entails accumulating aspirations of politically and socially progressive communities like Tajiks, Uzbeks, and Hazaras, which bring their own dynamism into the whole equation. The Taliban of today are more politically savvy creatures and aware of the world. And lastly, the women of Afghanistan themselves have carved out a role for themselves through their continual political and economic efforts, a role that cannot be reversed now. The women empowerment and protection of their civil rights should logically form the part of intra-Afghan dialogue and its formal outcome in the shape of a power sharing agreement. The role and space afforded to women in sync with the enlightened ideals of true Islamic egalitarianism, with focus on their education, inheritance, and civil rights, would form the thin edge of the spear that punctures the jaded and antiquated tribal notions of women suppression in Afghan society. Afghanistan is on the cusp of a new social revolution, and in my humble estimation, women would form part of the vanguard of that revolution. What needs to be done to achieve that, and how that needs to be done, is what we learn from our distinguished and learned panelists, which I'm sure will be more educated by the end of this session. So I look forward to a very absorbing session. Over to Kashan for formal start of the proceedings. Thanks.
Thank you, Brigadier Rashid Wali Janjua. Let's dive deeper into the discussion that we are here today for. There's consensus across the board that Afghan peace process must be Afghan-owned. But how could it be when 50% of the population is not sitting on the negotiating table, and more importantly, not owning the process? Perhaps the process must be made more gender sensitive. And to discuss such a perspective, I request our very first speaker from Afghanistan, Ms. Fawzia Koofi, who is in fact part of the ongoing intra-Afghan dialogue in Doha. Ms. Fawzia Koofi, can you please share your views?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kashan. And I would like to also thank Islamabad Policy Research Institute for organizing this very timely webinar, and also inviting people of relevance to share their views at the time when eyes are not only on the peace process in Doha and on the rise of violence in Afghanistan, but also on the new US administration and their policy towards the peace process. So before entering to answer your specific question about Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, and then women role into this ownership of the peace process, I would like to say that more than ever, after 4 decades of war, there is a need for a political settlement of the warring group in Afghanistan, namely Taliban. Because as a result of war for more than 4 decades, not only a lot of people are being killed in Afghanistan, not only the numbers that we lose them, but also the opportunities, economical opportunity and money opportunity that has been taken away from us, from the people of Afghanistan, and certainly it has impacted the region as well. As a result of this violence, we see more rise of military extremism in the region, which not only Afghanistan will be affected, and it is affected, our neighboring countries, Pakistan, and for neighboring countries as well, they will also not be protected from the increased engagement of military extremism. So there is a need for, before any other time, for a political settlement, because we have started this process on the 12th of September in Doha, and it has been almost 3 months that the negotiations are, going on. My expectation was that we will move a little bit speedier on agreeing things that are important, but yet relatively less important as comparing to other issues, for instance, to ceasefire or to political settlement. Those probably will be more important and time consuming as comparing to the rules of procedures, which we discuss right now. For the past almost 3 months, we have been negotiating how to negotiate. So yes, we had expected a little bit speed in the process, but in the meantime, I know that the war has been going on in Afghanistan for more than 4 decades. So people back home, especially with the rise of violence since the talks have started, expect to see the impact of the process on their life and see a ceasefire. But we know that it's a process that will take time, especially, a lot of uncertainties in terms of the U.S. New administration. We know that the U.S. signed a peace agreement with Taliban on the 29th of February. And I think the best scenario would have been then to start negotiation between the Afghan government or Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the Taliban at the same time when the talks with Americans and Taliban started, because that could put the umbrella of Republic as a whole in much more stronger position. But now that the deal has been signed, we have to negotiate our own part. I think people have different interpretation of what the Biden and Kamala Harris administration will actually perceive the peace process. My expectation is that that Afghanistan will continue to be in the focus of the foreign policy for United States, because the security in Afghanistan and in the region will benefit the U.S. security as well. We don't expect a major reshufflement in terms of the process. However, reforms, new individuals, new personnel, that is part of any new administration's responsibility. So with new people coming in on board to follow up or to pursue, we do not expect that the whole process will be actually on pause or resume again or reshufflement, because it took a lot of energy and time to start this process. We have paid a lot for this particular moment. Now, it is very unique on many sense. One of the things that makes the peace process of Afghanistan unique is because this is the first time actually the both sides sit together. Instead of using weapon and gun, which unfortunately still we use, we also use statements, words, phrases. We try to convince each other by the power of language. And then the other thing which makes it very unique is the thing you mentioned is the woman participation. It's one of those processes where women, where it's very unique in the sense that women rights and human rights will be discussed. In no other peace processes in the world, the issue of women rights or the issue of civilian rights will be, and rights and liberties are discussed. But in this process, they will be discussed. So therefore, in that sense, it is very important to ensure that women are not only in the negotiation table, which we are 20 out of 21 members, there are 4 women on representing the people and the women of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, but also ensure that women are there in every step of the process to ensure that we will not go back to the time that women of Afghanistan were not regarded as first-class citizens. And I don't have to mention the brutality and oppression that women of Afghanistan have undergone, not only because of Taliban, mainly because of Taliban, but also because of civil war. And we continue to pay the price. And not only, I think, women of Afghanistan, but also if you look at across the border with Pakistan, the same problem with, because of violence, women of Pakistan also suffer. People of Pakistan also suffer. So therefore, women inclusion and women voices to be heard is important. I personally regard the success in the process and sustainability of the process is equal to ensuring that there are women and human rights and minorities and victims of war. So throughout the process, if there are times that we do not see more interest by the negotiating sides on ensuring women's rights are preserved and human rights and the inclusivity of Afghanistan, the diversity, the transformation that Afghanistan have achieved over the past 20 years, if that is not respected, that is the moment then I see the process will not succeed. So therefore I connect my hope and expectation, that is the hope and expectation of women of Afghanistan, to the success of process by participation of women and ensuring that women's rights are ensured or protected and reserved. And on that, the unity, the sisterhood of your people, of your women, of international community, it is crucial because there are certain common values that we need joint efforts to protect them.
Thank you, Ms. Fawzia Koofi. You have shared such insightful remarks. Perhaps while the question of ceasefire and political agreement are so essential to be addressed, questions such as how could women be accommodated in the power structure and what challenges would women be like to be addressed in the process, these are such questions which remain quite unrepresented. And to deliberate and contemplate further on this question, I would like our next speaker, Ms. Shinkai Karokhail, to please share her views.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Pakistan Research, Islamabad Policy and Research Institute for organizing tonight's webinar. At least this is the first opportunity we can really directly connect it with other speakers and share our thoughts and concerns. Regarding Afghanistan peace process, I think it was very much rushed for US election. Taliban were given upper hand, government of Afghanistan was sidelined, women and civil society were totally abandoned, and peace deal was signed between America and Taliban without Afghan public knowledge and approval. On the other hand, because government was also how quickly joined this peace process and American wanted us to select our negotiating team. Of course, Afghanistan that time was also facing lots of political turbulence because of the endorsement of the election result. On the other hand, government also had responsibility to bring this all politicians for peace process. So what happened? Even like we did lots of lobby, we contact different diplomats, even our own government. Nobody listened, neither the American side or not our government. So government tried to bring on these political elites for the reason which I mentioned about. Because women were mostly emphasizing on inclusive peace process. Because we thought that there should be a balance between politics and civics. Women should make it at least 30% and involved on all levels of the peace process, from the negotiating team till the monitoring and also post-peace development. We Afghan accept Taliban as an Afghan citizen and plus political group beside all this militancy they are doing. We should also accept us as Afghan citizen, and also they should accept new Afghanistan. For the meaningful participation of Afghan women, we really wanted to have women rights activists who lives in Afghanistan, and also have like a good record of women rights activism. And also women, we want should be at least 30% from a negotiating team, and also in the reconciliation council. We believe that when women are sitting at the table, they're talking about human rights, they're talking about women's rights, they're talking about representing voice of 50%, which are women of Afghanistan. Women are talking about minority, women are talking about education, about all that's fundamental. But when men are sitting on the table, they are just thinking how to share the power. So I think we understand it's a big differences by having more at the table. So I think there is a different interest. Regarding gender equality and women's empowerment are a global and emerging phenomena, which is supervised by the UN, and women's empowerment agenda, which is provided by the UN agency. I think no country could violate that. But to having a sustainable peace in Afghanistan, why we are very much emphasizing on very inclusive peace process, and especially engagement or involvement of women, because besides political deal or political peace, we need a social reconciliation. And I think women of Afghanistan could play a very major and very important role in that social reconciliation, because women has the power and influence with the family and community, national and international level. So what about the new government of America, or Joe Biden, or a Democratic new administration? I think it's once again, it's a good opportunity, especially for women of Afghanistan. First, that maybe like generally their policy won't change regarding Afghanistan and this peace process. But I think there is the peace deal which happened between Taliban and Americans, mostly like their special envoy, Mr. Khalizad, and the foreign policy, foreign ministry were involved with that without engagement of generals or maybe CIA to really properly evaluate the situation and how to make the very responsible exit from Afghanistan, because Americans were not here in Afghanistan, in the region, to stabilize Afghanistan. But I think they tried to stabilize Afghanistan. This geography shouldn't be used by international tourist groups, which they don't have only agenda for the region, but also they have international agenda. And I think with the Democrats, they have more like a pro-development, human rights issue comparing to military engagement in the region. So once again, opportunity for we women of Afghanistan how to work with the new administration. At least we can raise and talk about women's involvement or meaningful engagement in the peace process, especially a presence of new vice president and the new government of America, which is make a record in the history of America. I think Kamala Harris not only could play or expected to play a very strong catalyst role to promote women's rights and women's engagement in this peace process, not in Afghanistan. I think globally she could have her own influence and role. She could also pressurize the government of Afghanistan by having more women in this process, very strong women in this process. But also they could pressurize the Taliban group. Regarding what's like our concern and what we are thinking about is, I think women of Afghanistan, also with the support of our international partners, human rights group, women rights group, activists, and especially from the region, how we can all work together, how to preserve what we achieved so far, especially in the recent 2 decades, from rights to education, health issue, economic, political participation. So everything, how we can preserve and promote this role. And also what's really very much a biggest challenge for women of Afghanistan, especially for our women representative in Doha, because first there are 4 women, and we have like a 21 women and 20 men from the other side, almost 37 men at this negotiation from both sides, and only 4 women. So definitely it's need more power and more support from outside, especially from Afghanistan. And also this is our, like Ms. Koofi said, that's this for some of human rights values or democratic values and women's rights issue. I think this is our joint obligation and our values that how we can all work together to give a support to them. And because women of Afghanistan, to be honest, they don't trust Taliban. Even like so many people, maybe they try to convince us that Taliban has been changed. But the way the statement, which they are very political or very tricky statement they are giving, that still cannot like convince us to believe and trust. So what we really need to, at the table of negotiation, how to clearly bring women's agenda at the table and discuss, and to really get the type of mentality they still have regarding women, because we believe we are equal human being, we are equal citizen of this country, we built this country, we are supporting this country. Why the other should like limit it or like tell us how much right do I have to get it? So we want to like negotiate this, our issues, our concern, our demand at the table as an equal citizen, and as I said, they should accept the new Afghanistan. They should accept new women of Afghanistan, because today is not like 20 years back. Today is with the presence of technology. I can talk to you. We can talk to the world. We can bring issues. We can complain about that. It's not compromisable to compromise on the rights of women, and once again push the women of Afghanistan towards the world once, which they locked us inside our house, and they totally exclude us from social, political, and economic life of Afghanistan. So at the end, I just want to conclude my words like that we really need like a pushed women's more active role of women in this peace process, from negotiating to monitor and to the post peace deal. And also we need the support of women's group, that how to convince those who are supporting peace process to develop a joint mechanism, because we need a proper monitoring mechanism, not from the international or maybe some of the countries here involved to support this peace process, but how some of the women's group and activists or feminist group, how also they monitor this peace process. And they shouldn't let the women of Afghanistan alone, because dealing with such an extremist group is not easy. It needs more energy, it needs more pressure. We need more solidarity from the region and also internationally. So this peace process should go very smoothly, and everybody should be given equal rights to bring up their issues, and we women should support for the sustainable peace. We can support this peace process without the support of our women of Afghanistan, I don't think we'll have a peace in Afghanistan. If we bring a political peace in Afghanistan, it will be very fragile, it will be broken, and I think there will be a new, like a start of a new conflict in the country. So thank you all, and I hope I could convince you to work with women of Afghanistan and support the women of Afghanistan, especially in this crucial time which we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shinkai. In fact, women are indeed equal citizens of the country, and inclusive Afghan peace process is what the Afghan women want. With victory of President-elect Joe Biden in the 2020 elections, things have been shaking up a bit in the US. Washington has its first female vice president as Kamala Harris. Earlier on Monday this week, President Biden announced his core national security team, 2 of which were women. In fact, Michelle Flournoy is going to be the first woman to lead Pentagon. Seemingly, there appears to be a renewed focus on women empowerment under Biden administration. So with this as the backdrop, I would like to turn the discussion to our distinguished speaker, Ambassador Retired Robin Raphel, to discuss what role the Biden presidency could play in enhancing the role of women in the peace process. Ambassador Robin, you have the floor. Ambassador, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you so much, Kashun. It's really a pleasure to be here. I want to thank IPRI for including me in this very important webinar, and particularly in such distinguished company of both Afghan and Pakistani women, and the 2 Afghans have spoken so eloquently. Before I turn to what I speculate could be some of the Biden administration approaches to this issue in Afghanistan, I want to just underscore some of the things that the previous speakers have said. Madam Koofi emphasized that the women's issue is a global issue, and that is so true. It manifests in one way or another in every country in the world, including the United States, I would say. And as Kashun has said, we are having our first female vice president. You would think in a country like America that might have happened earlier, but it just underscores that there's a challenge for women's equality at various levels all over the world. So I think that's an important point. And the idea now that it is accepted that women's issues and gender issues and minority issues and inclusivity are very much on the agenda in Doha, I think is really extremely important. You know, that in itself really is a breakthrough. And there are women on the negotiating team. Now you can say there should be 50% or whatever, but there are 4 extremely capable women. And as we've heard Mrs. Koofi speak, you can see she's perfectly capable of a voice that's representative of Afghan women. And as Madam Karokhail has said, it's not only at the negotiation table in Doha that you need women being active. It's in the whole idea of social reconciliation, community level reconciliation. At every level, you need women to be involved, and there is a role for women. And all of this also underscores to me the very important need for the government and administration in Afghanistan to have a much more effective communication strategy about what is going on in Doha and about the whole peace process. I mean, many people think women aren't involved at all. Well, clearly there are 4 women at the table in Doha. And people don't know what the agenda is, and it really stokes fear when there isn't good information out about what's on the agenda and what people are doing. And I think that is extremely, extremely important. Now, let me step back and look at Afghanistan in terms of what outsiders can do. I think we've all been very conscious, been made very conscious in the last 2 decades of both the possibilities, but also the limitations of what outsiders can do. And we've learned that we really cannot tell or dictate to Afghans what kind of government they should have, what kind of constitution they should have, what kind of trade-offs they should make in their peace negotiations. We've also learned that key issues like the role of women in society are political issues. They cannot be solved by military means. But I think the really important point, and this was underscored very, very well last week in the donors conference, that what outsiders can do is to make it very clear to all the parties and to whatever government emerges from these peace negotiations, that future assistance, future support, future respectability of the Afghan government is going to be very much conditioned on that government and that society showing respect for universal human rights, for women's rights, for minority rights, and so on. So where it isn't necessarily the right of outsiders to speak about a form of government, it's certainly their right to decide whether they will support financially and otherwise a government based on their values. So I think that's really an important point, that there is leverage on this process from the outside, because Afghanistan's still a developing economy. It needs support, financial and otherwise, from the outside, and will for some time to come. I know there's a journey to self-reliance, and the government's very keen on that, but it will take some time. So that gives leverage to outsiders. It's my own view, and I think the view of many here, that whatever constitution emerges from these negotiations, that it does not limit in any way the rights of women. There must be a basic document that provides for equality for women and minorities and everyone, that makes everyone an equal citizen. And this is something that I think outsiders will be looking very carefully at. It's not that anybody's constitution or laws are always totally honored. Sometimes these are aspirational ideas, but it's important that the founding documents of any government and society provide for equality. I think it's very important for outsiders, particularly for Westerners, to recognize that it is very important for neighboring countries, and particularly for Muslim countries, to make the same expectations clear of whatever emerges from this peace process in terms of equal rights for all. Now, let me just say a couple of things about what I would expect from the Biden administration. I'm not part of that administration. I don't speak for them, but let me just make a few observations. And one thing I would also underscore first off is that I wouldn't expect a major change in US policy, but there will be policy reviews and adjustments and so on, but not major reversals, I wouldn't think. I would underscore again that Americans have long been concerned with women's rights in Afghanistan. I think some of you may remember the 1995 Beijing Women's Conference, where then First Lady Hillary Clinton made a landmark speech about women's rights being human rights and human rights being women's rights. And this became a mantra. I mean, she didn't make up the phrase, but she she projected it on a world stage, and it really did set the stage for much more attention being paid to women's rights globally. And then in the 1990s, there was a movement here in the United States by the National Organization of Women, a very long-standing women's rights civil society organization, to draw attention to that time when the Taliban were in power in Kabul and treating women so horrifically. So there's a long-standing, particularly among democratic administrations, of the issue of women's rights in Afghanistan and throughout the world. But I do think, so the Biden administration will have a chance to sort of refresh how we're actually acting from the US side on some of these issues. I think they will continue to be more modest in recognizing that you need to have Afghan solutions to Afghan problems. And again, that these are political problems, not military problems, and need to be solved in a political way. And that the US main interest will continue to be security for America, but that's normal and as it should be. Where I think you'll find the Biden administration will have a positive effect is I think they will return to the view that America must remain generous in its support to developing countries throughout the world, and particularly in Afghanistan. There won't be this idea that as the troops draw down, the economic development assistance presence draws down. I think they will make a real effort to have a rigorous development presence, again, with conditionality, but not running away from the development responsibility that I think wealthier countries hold. I think they'll be very open to figuring out new ways to support women's development, women's rights, women's economic opportunity, educational opportunity. I think there'll be a sensitivity, again, to listen more to women, such as our panelists here, about the how of outside support, how Americans can most effectively support without dictating or putting our program ideas forward. We need to listen and adjust our programs to what Afghans really need. And again, I think we need to collaborate with countries in the region that often role models from the region might be more useful to women than those from the West. But altogether, promoting education, opportunity, the idea that women earning income can change the domestic dynamic in families, and all of these issues which we've learned about throughout the decades of trying to promote gender equality throughout the world. So I think you'll find a Biden administration really open to new thinking, but continued assistance and continued focus on the gender issue. I think I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Retired Robin Raphel, for such insightful remarks. Indeed, we need to focus on the region. And this leads us to our third stakeholder, Pakistan. Pakistan has played a very substantial role in furthering the Afghan peace process. And with Pakistan being such an important stakeholder, it's pertinent to hear from a Pakistani perspective. And for this, we have none other than former Ambassador Riffat Masood to discuss what role could Pakistan play to make the peace talks more inclusive and gender sensitive. Ambassador Riffat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It is an honor and a pleasure to be part of this panel, very distinguished panel of Afghan women who spoke so eloquently. And so I couldn't agree more with what they have to say. And of course, Rob and Raphel, who I know from a long time ago, when I was Consul General in Los Angeles, and we shared many of the views together. It's always useful to be the last speaker because most of what you want to say has already been said. So it makes your life easier. But what I just wanted to say very quickly and precisely is that, you know, we in the countries in the region, the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, of course, have strong stakes in peace in Afghanistan. And that is why not only this government, but even previous governments have always said that peace in Afghanistan is very, very important for peace in Pakistan and subsequently peace in the region. And we have suffered. The Afghan people have suffered. The people of Pakistan have suffered. And we have undergone decades of conflict. And it has been a difficult road. And it's unfortunate that we have developed lots of areas of mistrust where we could actually be cooperating and we could be working well together. But that's history now. And I think we should, I'm glad that we have this fora to talk about what to do in the future, how to look forward. I think as one of our distinguished speakers said that the peace deal was a rushed deal, but then it's better than having no deal. And it is a deal on which we can all work together. And I think that there is no doubt that the role of women and the role of civil society is crucial for peace to prevail, not only in Afghanistan, but of course in the rest of the region. Pakistan's position has been made clear many times, and I think it is it's still clear that Afghanistan will decide what Afghanistan wants to do. The Afghan people are responsible for what happens in Afghanistan. The Afghan people are responsible for the future of Afghanistan. The Afghan people are responsible for the form of government they want, the form of governance they want. It is them. But because we are neighbors and immediate neighbors, and I've had the honor and pleasure of visiting the border areas as well, we are so interlinked and intertwined that we both have stakes in each other's countries. And we can both act as facilitators. That's what we should be doing. We should be working. We both have the same goal, both governments, and not only, let's set aside the governments. Let's talk about the people. Both people of Afghanistan and Pakistan want peace. And who better to promote peace than the women? And I think that we can both learn a lot from each other. I think Pakistan has had this opportunity, and I must say it's a privilege that we've had, despite the fact that there have been a lot of difficulties for the women in Pakistan, in South Asia. You know, women's rights and women's issues are global, as has been said before. And even the Western democracies, so-called Western democracies, don't have, the women there don't have all the rights that they would like other women to have. But we have been fortunate in South Asia that the women in this region have actually grown politically. And we have had role models in the past and even in the present, where we've had women politicians, we've had women academics, we've had professional women who have been able to play a very important role in policymaking. No doubt, I would agree, and you would all agree with me, that their voices have not always been heard, but that does not stop them from making their point of view. And I think that is what women in Afghanistan, not only Afghanistan, but even women all over the world, and in particular in our region, should continue to strive to make their voices heard. And the best way, I think, to do that is to continue this policy of engagement. You know, having been a diplomat for more than 35 years and worked in various places, you know, conflict doesn't resolve anything. And it is so easy to blame the other. It is the easiest thing to do is to say, well, it's because of them that we are in this situation. That may be true in certain areas, in certain circumstances, but one must also look at oneself. And I think now is the time for both Afghanistan and Pakistan to look inwards also, and for Afghanistan especially, to see how they can open the doors, how the government of Afghanistan can open the doors for the women. Because I must say, I have read a lot about Afghan women in politics, in journalism, academics. I have had the pleasure of meeting Afghan women diplomats, and I must say that they're the best of the best. And now is the time for not only Pakistan, but Pakistan, of course, being the immediate neighbor, has a lot at stake, but all the countries of the world, and especially the countries of our region, to help the Afghan women in whichever way they feel they can learn from each other and have their voices heard. You see, the Afghan women are very formidable, I must say, and they are well placed. They know their society, they know their culture, they know their country, they know their people. So they are the best people to give their opinions, make the policies for those countries. We across the border can help in whatever way possible. This kind of a engagement webinar is very useful, but also I think women politicians from both countries should interact more readily. Women entrepreneurs from both countries should interact. Women academics should interact and learn from each other how we have overcome some of the hurdles that we faced, because there is no doubt that we cannot achieve any form of peace, any form of progress, any form of economic prosperity unless we have the women on board. Because the women, as has been mentioned earlier, so I won't repeat it, they know the pulse of the people. They work in the community. They know what is needed. Men, I'm sorry about the men who are maybe watching this, but the men like to talk, and it's women who actually do things. That is an international phenomenon. And I think that is an opportunity that both us, Pakistani women and Afghan women, as well as women in Iran and in other, in the region, even globally, have the opportunity to promote their own. The other thing I would like to say that Pakistan has always been very open to any form of dialogue with Afghanistan. You see, it has been so important for us because of the years that we have. I mean, we have made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. And it takes a brave person, believe me, a brave person to admit to those mistakes. It's a coward that hides behind not making mistakes, So we have made mistakes. We have to learn from those mistakes and we have to move forward. So I think students, the youth, young women, young students from Pakistan, young students from Afghanistan, even from Iran, we should all be interacting together and trying to, the one thing that Ambassador Robin mentioned about communication, the communication strategy she was talking about, I'd like to go beyond that a bit and say that, there has been a lack of communication. A lack of communication, not only at the global level, but even bilaterally and regionally. And I think that lack of communication is what we need to overcome now. So I see a very good prospects with Afghanistan. I know the peace deal has a lot to do in it. There has to be a lot of work. The United States globally has been an actor and has played a role in perhaps every region in the world. I don't think there's any region where the United States is not present. But I think that we should not be looking at the United States, and the United States should also not be trying to sort of intervene as they have in the past. And we have to let the people of Afghanistan decide their own future. Because you see, it is very important to be culturally sensitive to people. And the only ones who can be culturally sensitive are the people themselves. So the Afghan women are culturally sensitive to what the Afghan society needs. perhaps the Pakistani woman may not be as culturally sensitive as the Afghan woman would be, because she lives there, she works there, she's been working in a conflict area for decades. And so let her decide, give her the wings, give her the strength to fly. And I think that is where Pakistan will be ready to play a role. I don't think that anybody in Pakistan would want to curtail in any way the role of Afghan women in building peace, or the role of any Afghan to build peace in not only their country, but also in our own country. So I think that while it is good to have, outsiders, as Robin puts it, or people from other governments and societies playing a role and giving guidance, but I think it should stop at guidance. You see, when you have conditionalities, when you have pressure, then it makes it very difficult for the society to grow, for people to grow. And if we make mistakes, well, let us make our mistakes. We will learn from our mistakes. But I think interference has to stop. And I think Afghan women need to be given the opportunity. They should be allowed to play an important role in their policy making. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Riffat. That was so thoughtful of you. With this, we now move on to the question-answer session. And given the overwhelming number of questions, I will try
Sir,
to...
could you please speak a little bit loudly?
Can you hear me now, ma'am?
Yes, now better.
So we now move on to the question-answer session. And given the overwhelming number of questions, I would like to address as much as I could. So the first question for the panelist is from our senior fellow, Ambassador Asif Durrani. His question is, with regard to women's rights in Afghanistan, Taliban are considered to be more rigid. Perhaps rather the question is, what contribution did the present government or their predecessors make to improve the plight of women? Do you think Afghan society has come at the time to offer equal rights to women in a situation where sometimes even the rights of men are not given access to? Perhaps Ms. Fawzia Koofi or Ms. Shinkai, you could answer this question.
I will take this question and then excuse myself as agreed before, because I have to, now with the technology, the world is, I guess, rather more connected and easier for all of us to get connected virtually. So on daily basis, many of such important platforms are being created, and we have to attend as much as our time allows. I have to attend another one. Well, look, we have a constitution that guarantees equal rights for all citizens, regardless of their gender, their political beliefs, or their social linkages, and their religious belief. According to Constitution of Afghanistan, every citizen has an equal rights. Also the other laws, including like the Civil Code or the Penal Code, they also provide rights and opportunities for women. And interestingly, we did, before the negotiations start, we did a survey of, or an assessment of the laws that were enforced during the Taliban time, to see where, in which laws Taliban had their, kind of views, and they regard them in contradiction with Islam. It's interesting to know that none of the laws that actually were enforced during Taliban, including the Civil Code of Afghanistan, which is enforced since 1975, since my age actually, none of those articles contradicts Islam, and Taliban did not oppose it. This was something that was enforced during Taliban. And so therefore, the laws of Afghanistan ensures equality. Now, when it comes to social practices, I think globally in our region more, it has been discriminatory. The social norms and the social practices are defined and predefined by the society. in a way that it actually discriminates and does not provide equal opportunity for women. Afghanistan has been suffering on that sense a lot, but lately things have changed. There is a transformation, as I indicated before. And as a result of that transformation, women and younger generation have a stronger voice. And to have women in the negotiation team sitting across the table with Taliban, to have younger generation sitting across the table with Taliban, that is what makes our team unique, diverse, and representative of the current Afghanistan. And also makes it important in a way that today Afghanistan is not only represented by its traditional politicians, in this case Taliban or the delegation in our side, but also by women and by younger generation. Yes, it has not been equal opportunity, but all the credit, I think, goes to the women of Afghanistan and our partners and international friends for, resilience, strength, passion that they have demonstrated under difficult circumstances to provide an equal opportunity for themselves and for the others. Now we have started the negotiation. The start of the negotiation was an important step forward for achieving a sustainable peace. I think the major task starts now. The major task, the challenging task, is ahead of all of us. Nobody can actually escape the responsibility, because security for Afghanistan is security of the region, and it, as a result of that, it matters the security of the world as well. So we all have to play our constructive role in this process, not only to ensure that women of Afghanistan are, their rights are safeguarded, and we do not experience a time where women have to look at the world and its beauty from the small window of their houses as they did during Taliban or during the civil war, but also use the opportunity as many other citizens. Not only that, but ensure that people actually enjoy ceasefire, enjoy an environment where there is no violence, enjoy a power sharing where Taliban, the rest of the political community, women of Afghanistan, and also the diversity of Afghanistan is presented and seen in that political settlement. I hope that with new administration in the United States, and especially having, as stated before, having a first female, I don't know when are we going to have a first female president or vice president in Afghanistan, but anyways, having a first female president, women of Afghanistan have more assurance that these globally connected rights will be a priority, as peace is a priority. We have received assurance from our international friends during the Geneva conference, which just concluded 2 days ago, but so many things to do in the region. The Pakistan role for creating a new narrative in our relationship, for promoting a new narrative, and for genuinely being a supporter of the process in a way that as a result of the process, not only we achieve a sustainable peace, but also we achieve a situation where everyone has the right to vote once. So one individual, one human being, one vote. That is when we think, peace will be sustainable in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Ms. Fawzia Koofi. Before you leave, we have an excellent question lined up by our researcher here at IPRI. This question is by Umar Khan. And he says,
please use mic because still I cannot hear properly.
Can you hear me now, ma'am?
Yes, nice.
This question is directed to Ms. Fawzia Koofi, and this is the question goes: despite massive strides made by Afghan women for their rights in the last 2 decades, major obstacles remain. For instance, according to the Amnesty International, violence against women in Afghanistan is high. Could you please talk about specific Afghan women-related policies that you're trying to push and negotiate with the Taliban? And this is the question that I'm very interested in as well.
Well, as I stated before, and I think I also heard it rightly from Undersecretary Raphel, that women's rights are human rights. These are global principles. We cannot change them. In our talks with Taliban, and I think in a way I touched upon this, I regard the success of peace process interconnected with how the process will protect the citizens' rights, mainly the women's rights. And so therefore, for us, we have a constitution that is a guideline for us. Now, that constitution, of course, is not written in the stone. There is always room for amendment. But for us, the chapter about women and human rights and civilian rights is something that we do not want to be negotiated over, or it should not be a matter for bargaining. And therefore, what we have kind of resettled ourselves as 4 women in the negotiation table is we have made a policy level agreement internally in the group that we are part of all the committees. So at least there is 1 woman representative in every committees that we set up. We are part of bilateral meetings to ensure there is no decision being made for us, but we are part of decision making. When it comes to, because we are now at the beginning of the talks, we are, as I said before, we are negotiating how to negotiate, but moving forward, I think it will be crucially important for the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan delegation and for our international friends to stay united and firm on their message to support, because I think Taliban take the international messaging serious, because in a post-peace settlement where Taliban will be part of a political settlement, we do need international support, we do need funding, we do need projects to be funded by international community, and I'm not sure how much the world will be interested to support a government or a political process where, as you rightly said in the beginning, 55% of its population are not included. So therefore, it's not a matter of just woman symbolic participation. We are beyond symbols now. We are meaningful participants of the process. In the meantime, that we are worried, and we hope that you all will keep an eye in this process and see the success of the process as a benchmark for inclusion of women.
We move on to the next question, which is by our very own researcher here at IPRI, Usama. The question goes: how formal arrangements of intra-Afghan peace agreements be made more concrete to guarantee protection of rights of women and girls by all stakeholders, especially Taliban? Can traditional structures of Afghan society and state be also used to ensure compliance towards the protections? And he would also like you to address how can an inclusive approach be adopted by men and women belonging to rural and urban societies. Perhaps Ms. Fawzia or Ms. Shinkai, either of you could answer this question.
Well, I think as Ms. Fawzia mostly almost answers all those questions, including this one. Regarding that including in the urban or in the city, because mostly like even our international friends or like people, maybe that like somehow very much pro-Taliban engagement or coming back of Taliban, I said that, well, there is few women from the city, they are talking about women's rights and human rights, but the majority of people who are living in the rural area are not including, or they are not representing. So this is what it hurts us as a woman, that nobody asks these men how many people or percentage they are representing. Whether Taliban is really representing the entire society of Afghanistan? Not at all. So they had a conflict with the different jihadi groups. They had issues with the moderate people, with the educated people. I mean, definitely even like they were absolutely against women's role or inclusion. So how it make it more concrete or possible that women should be like given equal rights or inclusion in the future of Afghanistan? I think today's Afghanistan is absolutely different. But I always try to convince our international friends, those who were thinking maybe this Doha debate, this debate will be started in Germany or Oslo. And that's what I personally request some of diplomats, that the Taliban need to face new Afghanistan. So I propose that parallel to this debate, which will be started at that time, we requested them, that between the official delegation from government or from Afghanistan state and also from Taliban, but I think they also need to see and have a meeting with the women's rights activists, with women who was representing the 50% of Afghanistan. Maybe the level of demand is different. Maybe the level of understanding for their rights is different. But they have like demands. They have their own concern, you know. And also, Taliban should have a meeting with a new generation of Afghanistan. It's not only the women's issue. If you can see that more than 60% or 65% are less than 30 years old in Afghanistan, do you think that with the same mentality which Taliban had once in Afghanistan, they want this? Because today we have a democratic system, we have an elected government. Doesn't matter how many people participated, but there was a chance for everyone to cast their vote. People has the right to vote or support others. You know, we have a freedom of speech in this country. We have a political parties, good or bad, ugly, whatever, but people has the right. You know, so do we really were able to speak during Taliban government? Not as a woman, definitely we would not even exist in active political or social life. What about the men of Afghanistan? So I remember when Taliban government collapsed and I was working for one of the women organization, traveling to a very backward province and one of the very remote village. I meet with a grassroots village woman. I asked, what do you want? Maybe you cannot believe it. Every woman said that I want school for my child. This was the level of her understanding and demand. 20 years back, she was asking for girls' school. She doesn't.
There appears to be a technical issue with Ms. Shinkai Vaughn. I think we should proceed to the next question. The question is by our Executive Director, Communication and Reform, Dr. Hussain Nadeem. This question is directed to Robin Raphel. The question goes, America has for long, especially under President Obama, pursued a policy of winning hearts and minds, which tinkered with civil society in Afghanistan through aid money and local NGOs. The policy has been criticized heavily by locals and academics globally as a neo-colonial intervention. The question is, will there be a revival of winning hearts and minds approach in Afghanistan under Biden administration? If so, do you think it will damper the organic civil and women's rights movement by tagging them with American agenda? How does the US operate in such situations where its neoliberal interventions can create havoc in foreign lands?
Okay, thank you for that question, Hussein. I'd say a couple of things in response to that. Number one, and this underscores something that Riffat Masood was talking about, which is the need for more engagement across the board among all kinds of groups, Afghans with Afghans, Afghans with the donor community, the support community, Afghans with their neighbors, and so on and so forth. And one thing I can categorically say about the Biden administration, and it's been said by many of them now with the new national security team, and that is that diplomacy is back in. And I think that's really important, you know, as a longtime diplomat myself. And President-elect Biden has appointed an extremely capable diplomat to be our permanent representative at the UN, which is sort of crystallizes that view. So that's very important. And diplomacy, as those of us who practice it for many years recognize, involves a lot of listening. And as I tried to convey earlier, the Biden administration has a chance to refresh its approach on development assistance and other things as well. But I think the basic policy line will stay the same. But to development assistance, and try through listening and engagement with Afghan counterparts to come up with a way of helping, a way of supporting the rights of women and minorities and all of those important issues in a way that is helpful to them, that is not projecting our way of doing things in a neo-colonial way, but rather is supportive of the way forward that we hear from people on the ground, whether it's men, women, you know, minorities, whatever. I think the Biden administration will want to proceed in a way that is supportive of, not dictatorial, in terms of how we help. Now, I will say that earlier I said there will be conditionality on assistance. And, you know, I firmly believe that that is fair, that if the US taxpayer is going to be supporting a program, it needs to be an effort that is consistent with our values. You know, so I think that that's not only fair, it's also important to American citizens. But we want to do it in a way that is genuinely helpful and not neo-colonial. Thank you. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ambassador Robin Raphel. We will now have the last question for the question answer session, and this question is directed to former Ambassador Riffat Masood. The question is by Hamza Riffat, our researcher at IPRI. The question goes, is the Taliban's view of women's role in the Afghan society considered an impediment towards women empowerment and political participation in Afghanistan?
Well, you know, the Taliban have traditionally and historically been obscurantist. Can you hear me? Yes? Yeah? Yeah. Obscurantist, and they have their own interpretation of Islam and how to govern, which is not necessarily shared by other Muslim countries. And even within Muslim countries, there was a lot of criticism on how the Taliban were treating women, or generally, in fact, carrying out, governing the country and their ideology. And there, in Pakistan also, there was there is even now a feeling that Taliban need to actually reform and grow out of their obscurantism and misogynistic views and taper down a bit. And as Brigadier Rashid had mentioned earlier, that they have, I think, over the period of time, unfortunately, these 20 years of war and conflict and the difficulties, and then Taliban have also, perhaps, we hope, learned that they cannot continue like this. I mean, this is now, Afghanistan has changed, the region has changed, the world has changed, and Taliban have to accept that what they stood for, what they were preaching was totally unacceptable. And it was, in fact, one of the reasons, the major reason for holding the Afghan society down. So I think that although there may be some elements within the Taliban, I don't know, who may still hold those very reactive kind of views, I think the Taliban also, and the peace deal has actually shown that the Taliban, elements within the Taliban at least, are willing to engage, are willing to reach out and to understand that, well, 2020 is here, and that we have a new government. We have a new government in the United States. We have a new thinking in Pakistan also. And we cannot practice what was being practiced earlier. So I would only hope that the Taliban would have learned from their mistakes and not hold the women back, because you see, they would fail in that. I can very categorically, I believe that if the Taliban continue to hold the same kind of views that they did in the past, they will not succeed. And we will again see a retroactive, a regressive situation developing in Afghanistan, which nobody wants. So Taliban, I think, have also perhaps, they're not, Taliban are pretty smart, and they have probably seen that what they tried to practice just didn't work. And now hopefully some elements, at least within the Taliban, will be engaging better with not only their Afghan government and the Afghan society, but also with their regional countries and globally as well.
Thank you, Ambassador Riffat. That was such an insightful question-answer session. With this, I would now like to request Acting President IPRI, Brigadier Rashid Wali Janjua, for his concluding remarks.
Thanks, Kashan. At the end of this session, I think we all stand educated. And I formally thank Ambassador Riffat Masood, Raphel, Shinkai Karokhail, and Koofi for their very enlightening discourse. And some of the takeaways that we take away from this discourse are that there is a need of greater and continual engagement by Afghan women into this process of inter-Afghan dialogue. And perhaps at global level and regional level, there's a need of monitoring mechanism by women activist groups to remain active and have a kind of an implacable pressure to keep the process towards the right direction. And then what Robin Raphel said was very important, that it should be a full community support and contingent upon the international community's help to Afghans. The support should be contingent upon their continual engagement with this process of human rights for the women. I think this is something which is very, very important. And the new United States administrations, we cannot prognosticate what they think and what they do, but there are prospects of optimism, as one could surmise from their Democrats' political philosophy. They are more about public engagement, diplomacy, student exchange programs, and soft power. So I think there is a cause for optimism, and we would live to see a better Afghanistan. And as I earlier said in my remarks, that the world has changed. Afghans themselves are suffering a war fatigue. The Taliban want a new kind of inclusive, polity, in which there would be equal stakeholders, politically also, economically also, and women form one of the most important components. So I once again thank all the participants for a very enlightening discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. With this, we come to the end of the webinar. I personally really enjoyed the discussion, and I hope that all our viewers and participants out there found the discussion as insightful, knowledgeable, and inclusive as we did. Thanks again, and a special note of gratitude to our speakers who are joining us from different time zones. Please make sure to follow IPRI on its social media platforms to keep tabs on events, publications, and research work. Allah Hafiz.